Hey, thanks for listening. It's David Yak here. You're listening to Yak About Today, and I've been thinking about the guest that I was supposed to have on today, but had to put it off for another day. So I thought I'd take the time today, maybe to answer a few questions, maybe to talk a little about tech, and see where it all goes. So bear with me, because that's what we'll yak about today. What's up, everybody? David Yak here for Yak About Today, hoping you are better, healthier, and more informed than any generation that came before. So if the years 46 to 64 mean something to you, then this is the place you want to be. Now put your headphones on, go for a run, and listen to what we yak about today. All right, David here, and you are listening to Yak About Today. So, as I've said earlier, we were supposed to have a great guest on that we put on, that we actually postponed for another week, I believe. And so that left me the time to sort of talk to you directly and see if we can do what we haven't done in a long time, and that's answer some questions. Maybe talk about some experiences I've had with tech that you can relate to. And so that's what I think we'll do. And if you're interested in all this, then keep listening. If not, wait till next week until we have another interesting guest on. But why don't we start with some questions? All right. So, you know what I forgot to do? I think I forgot to write down where these questions came from. So I think this one came from Minnesota. Okay, so first question. Which of your guests in the summer series did you find most fascinating, or did you get the most out of? All right, I think that came from Minnesota, and I'm not sure I have your name, so I'm sorry about that. It's interesting. So we've had, during the summer series, we had about 15 guests, and it ranged a lot of financial information and some interesting topics that caught me by surprise. So I would say, I think it's a difficult choice. So let's look at who we had. We had Gordon Stein, who had an interesting idea. He put out a book called Cash Flow Cookbook, which, if I remember correctly, what he did was write recipes for spending money or how to save money. And if you follow them, you can accumulate savings, quite significant savings. So I found that really interesting. We had in the financial space, once again, we had Julia Carlson. She was the CEO of Financial Freedom Wealth Management Group. And she was the one that really talked about investing, or the wiser and more mature, how you would invest at this stage of your life. We had another one, Benjamin Bratt, who was an investment advisor also. And let's see who else we had in the money category. I think that's about it. I thought, interesting, there was one more, Eric Rosenberg. I really liked him. He talked about sort of the side hustle, how you can turn like your side love into an actual business, and I thought that was interesting. So that's sort of the financial picture that we got. And then we had some really interesting subjects, like Brad Zupp. He was sort of a memory athlete, and one of the big challenges we find as we get older are, our memory seems to go, and I always use the joke of how we walk into a room, and you look around, you go, why am I here? And what he does is show you the exercises you can go through that as you age, you can actually make your memory better, unless you're afflicted with one of the ailments that prevents you from having a good memory. So I ran him for 2 weeks, I believe, because I was really interested, for me personally, and I hope for you, that we would talk a lot about memory and how we can keep our memory. All right. Let's see. There was Sean Anderson. A lot of people were self-help, some more interesting than others. There was one, Bill Protzman. He's an example of using music for self-care and the role music plays in our lives. And that was interesting. The one that I was sort of walking a fine line with was Elliot Katz. And he talked about masculinity in a way. He insinuated that men have become less masculine sort of as women emerged. And I wasn't sure really how to walk that fine line with him, because, on the one hand, maybe men should be playing a masculine role, a more masculine role, but not at the detriment of the role women should play in being totally equal partners with us. So I wasn't really sure what case he was making, except he seemed to find that there was a benefit in men retaining their masculinity or finding it again. So those are the sort of the people that I found interesting. Of course, we had nutritional people on with Dr. Stephen Lewis, Tom King. He got us going on a diet. So I guess that's sort of a summary of the guests we had on. And to follow that up, I got a question from, I think it was London. I'm not sure. I remember when I pulled these questions, I just forgot to write down where they came from. And this question was, so everyone has a different view everyone had a different view on your show of dieting, exercising, investing. How did you decide who to follow? I thought that was a really interesting question, because in some cases I was so fascinated with some of the guests I had that when I talked to sort of Tom King, many of you may know he's the founder of Stevia. That's another sugar sweetener. And he's the author of Guy Gone Keto, and keto was a certain diet that's based on sort of protein and fats, and of course no carbohydrate type of thing. And so when I talked to him, all of a sudden the next day I was looking in my refrigerator and said, okay, I'm going to go on the keto diet. But then if I talked to somebody else, I followed their advice on going on their health routine. And the same thing with the financial sectors and that type of thing. I went, wow, that's an interesting way of investing. Maybe I should look at how I invest. So I guess I'm one of those people that just jumps from one thing to another, depending on who I'm talking to, and probably doesn't say that much for me. So that's how I would answer that question. Here's one. Why did you stop doing a tech show? I think I talked about this earlier. When I started the show, when I was asked to do the show, it was because I had done several interviews on the radio station where people were calling on me for a certain tech expertise. And then the producers thought it would be good if we did a show on technology. And because I'm a tech geek, as many of you know who have been listening for the last 180-something shows, I decided that I would do a tech show. And what I found was it was good, and I'm going to do a piece on this later, it was good for me to in explaining how to deal with your cable company, or how it works, or your mobile phone companies and what to look for. And sometimes I was able to explain what devices you should buy, what I thought was good for you. But after a while, I realized that some of this really lent itself more to a YouTube channel where I could actually show you things instead of just talking about them. So as we progressed, I found that it was more difficult for me to really pick subjects and keep the conversation going on a radio show or a podcast. So it just so happens, as it turns out, I had a bigger 55 plus audience, so we decided to expand it, and ergo the kind of guests we have on now. And it seems to be working, but I still have a great love of tech. And even though I don't actually review tech, I sort of share my experiences with you, as I'm going to do at the end, in the second part of this show. So the last question, somebody warned me not to put it in, and I won't say where it comes from. Somebody says, "Are you gay?" So my answer to that is, I'm not sure, but I'll have to ask my husband. Maybe he knows. All right, so we're going to break for our sponsor, who's a great sponsor. And I'll be back, and I'm going to talk about cutting the cord. All right, this is David Yak here. You're listening to Yak About Today, and we'll be right back. I want to take a moment to talk to you about New Vision Eye Center. You know, for the last couple of years, they've been a sponsor of this show, and I couldn't be prouder. I've met so many people that have walked up to me and thanked me for recommending them. I hear all sorts of stories about how they've worked miracles. And as you know, I've been a patient of New Vision Eye Center for years. So when I say go see Dr. Minotti, Reinauer, Tate, and O'Brien, it's because I wouldn't trust my eyes to anyone else. And we are back. So I'm going to attempt to share an experience with you, and I will also try to get this in the sequence, the right sequence, so you'll understand it. So you've all heard, or most of you have heard, about cutting the cord. And what that is in reference to is if you have a cable TV system, you know, that provides you a box with all your channels, your local channels, the major networks. When you take that box away and you just keep your internet connection, that's cutting the cord. And many people do that because their main reason for watching on a big screen is to watch Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime, where they can see most of the television shows and many movies and special events and those movies and TV that are created specifically for those channels. So that's what we mean by cutting the cord. Okay, so there is another option which I call the SemiCut, and that is getting rid of the cable box and not only having Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, or whatever other online streaming services you have, but adding something that tries to replicate the experience of having a cable box with your normal channel lineup. Okay, so part one of the story goes, I received a bill. And the bill was for $149. Why did that shock me? Because originally, when I signed up for Comcast's Xfinity service, I had a 2-year deal for $99, which gave me relatively high-speed internet. And with that, I got a cable box and the normal channels, your local channels again, network, and a lot of the channels that we watch. None of the special channels like Showtime or HBO or Stars. And for $99, I thought that was fair because I did have Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime. That bill that I got for $149, and I didn't really think about it, but I called Xfinity and I said, what's this? This went up $50, and they told me it was the end of my contract, and that was the normal price. Well, I was pretty furious since I wasn't getting anything special to begin with, and they said to me, look, you can go on our new price, 2-year contract for about $119. Then I said, well, when does this all change? When does this bill due? And they said in 10 days, and then you could start your new contract or whatever. I said, you know, I need those 10 days to think, But in the meantime, I want you to cut the cord. I want you to cancel my cable service. I'll return the box. And knowing in the back of my head I could always change my mind, but I knew I wanted to do something different. So here's the interesting part, and this goes back to what I always told you, and I think I did the SiriusXM explanation. Cancel, cancel, cancel. And every time you use the word cancel, the price changes. So then they offered me the $99 special, and I said, no, just let's get rid of the cable box and just give me internet service. And they go, well, we have a $79 package with internet service and a cable box. And except for the cable box costing $10 extra, it would cost $89. And for that, I would lose one or two channels, but basically keep most of it. And I said no. And they said, for, I believe it was $75, they offered me something minus a lot of the channels, but still keeping the local channels and maybe one of the two channels that I watch. And finally, I said no. And I said, I'd like internet. And they said, that's $79. And I said, okay, $79 for just internet as opposed to the offer you just made me with a cable box and all that. And they said, look, we have a special on internet only for $64 with a high-speed internet. I said, done. So $64 for the internet speed. They call it Blast. It comes in at about 150 megs coming down. Okay, that gave me 10 days to think about this. Now, what I was looking at, and I'm sort of watching the time here, is there are several online services that try to replicate the cable experience. It could be, I think, Sling. I think that's by Dish. DirecTV Now. Hulu has a live TV service attached to the Hulu that you already know. And YouTube has a service that, if you're familiar with YouTube, it works a lot like YouTube. And all of them, while slightly different, seem to offer basically the same packages. And the packages run between $30 and $40 a month. So I looked at them. So this is what I did in the household. I sat, and they all give you a freebie, like 2 weeks or a month to test things out. So since they were online, I took the freebie on all of them and really watched and learned how to use them, learned about their user interfaces. And at the end of the first week, I said, okay, you know what I'm most comfortable with? I'm most comfortable with YouTube TV. And you may be different. You may like the interface on DirecTV or PlayStation View or one of those. But I sort of like the idea of YouTube TV. And it seemed to have every channel that I watch, including the tennis channel, which I used to pay another $10 extra to Comcast. So this is how I made the transition. For the rest of the next week, or part of the next week, what I did was I kept the cable box in there, and I started watching as much as YouTube TV as I could. I tried it out on all my devices. And remember, there's no charge. Unlike cable, every time you add a television set or another way of watching, they do additional charges, and the online services don't. So you can put it on your bedroom TV and on your iPad and on your computer and on your phone, that type of thing, for the same $40 a month. So I tried that, and Bill, who's not technically savvy, I had him also trying to watch the YouTube TV as much as he can, both on TV and on his iPad and that type of thing. Then what I did was I took 2 days where I took out the cable box, and I said, okay, we're only using YouTube TV. And what happened was, we struggled. The user interfaces are very different. When you use these services, you have to put your mindset into computer mode. You know, the way you've learned to interact with the computer. If you have that mindset, the user interfaces will be easier to make your way through. So we spent those last 3 days until the day I had to give up the cable box before my new billing started, and we decided it's a go. So I returned the cable box, and all I had was internet. And, the missing part, what I didn't tell you, in order to get these packages on your TV set, you need some kind of box or stick that has the service on it. Sorry about that. I missed that earlier. So I went out and I got the Roku Ultra, and that was a $99 box, but you can do the Roku stick for something like $29, and that would probably be just as good. And I installed the YouTube TV service. So it seems to work flawlessly. You have to understand, when your internet connection is disrupted or gets slow, it will interfere with the TV. It does not happen often. Let me tell you one of the benefits that I found about using this. When you use a cable box and you're watching high-definition TV, in order for the cable box to squeeze all those channels together, to give you all those channels, they do something called compression. And they'll compress the videos. And what often happens is you don't get that perfect picture that your TV is capable of, because there's certain compression that deteriorates the sound and picture just enough that you sort of notice it, but you don't. Anyway, when you're when you're hooked into a high-speed connection with YouTube TV, it puts out all the bandwidth to make that TV perfect. I noticed that my 10-year-old Sony TV, which is a 1080p TV, looked much sharper, much better. I couldn't really believe the picture quality as compared to the Xfinity cable box. So all these services have their downsides. Some of them don't have the channels you want. Others don't have local channels. Others have packages that you like or you may not like. So this is what I went through. And if you're interested in cutting the cord, why don't you write me a note and ask me any questions. Of course, you can get me at yakabouttoday@gmail.com. That's yakabouttoday@gmail.com. And maybe I can talk you through it or address those problems on the show. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the show. Next week, we will return with a guest. And so this is really David Yeck here, and I love you guys. Wish you well, and peace.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak, don't talk back. Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust power.